Hi there, I decided to do this video of Under Dark Shades because I like to keep Black Bright News as a news kind of channel, and I like to use dark shades to do with relationships and more light-hearted things. Well, narcissism isn't a light-hearted subject at all, but I don't think it kind of fits in with Black Bright. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, I'm doing it on this channel. And the reason I wanted to do this video is because we keep seeing so much videos on the narcissist, and there's not much saying about how narcissistic we all are. We all have narcissistic traits, and this isn't to justify or to defend the narcissist at all. It's just the truth. Now, ever since I've been looking at this narcissistic behavior, I've been watching people, watching how they behave, and I realized that there are some people who could really be perceived as being narcissistic, but because they have the empathy sometimes, and because they are not totally ego-centered and self-serving, they can't be considered as a fully blown narcissist. Now, I know there are degrees of narcissism, and I know we all have narcissistic traits, but we have to put it in perspective. So what I was thinking, this is all my own thinking, even though academics might have written about it, I'm just thinking about this from my point of view. So as a baby, we are mollycoddled, we are hugged, we are cuckooed. Our parents tell us how beautiful we are, how lovely we are. They're always kissing us, holding us, and all that kind of stuff. And then after a while, they get kind of tired, naturally tired. They don't want to kiss you and cuddle you and tell you how beautiful you are because the novelty's worn off. And so what sometimes happens is they start looking about themselves, their own needs. Sometimes when you're crying, you get on their nerves, so they put you into another room. But they don't realize how the change is impacting a baby or a young child. That child can't self-validate. So all he or she knows is that the parent is treating him differently or her differently, and they don't know why. So when they're screaming and crying and they're not getting the attention that they're used to getting, then they become confused. Now, from the parent's standpoint, they have a baby who is absolutely wonderful in the beginning, and then they have to set boundaries. We're always told, don't pick up a child every time it cries. He's got to learn to realize that he can't have everything that he wants when he wants it. But the fact of the matter is that when that child was born, that is what you were doing. Every time he opened up his mouth, you were there feeding him, soothing him, loving him, and all of those things. And then all of a sudden, when it suits you, you decide, okay, enough's enough. We're not going to do that anymore. Now, what happens is when that child is trying to adapt to that withdrawal of consistent love and attention, that's when the narcissistic traits start developing from a very, very early stage. And it's exacerbated or compounded when other children, other siblings come into the fray, because then that child is left even further back, and then they're forever trying to get the attention, the admiration of their parents. And when it's not forthcoming, as they grow into adults, they try to get that from their peers and their adults. And some of them turn into obnoxious creatures, and some of them where the parents have been able to show the child acceptance and love and try to, at least give that child some balance. It might not be so much. They might not become so narcissistic. But yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to understand how we all have it. There will always be times when we become self-serving, when we've had enough, when somebody asks us for a favor and we don't feel like doing it. or somebody comes, or you want something, and you just want it. You don't want to have to explain why you want it. And if your partner has it, you're like, oh, I'd like that. Can I have it? Or whatever it is. I mean, those are silly examples. But all I'm trying to say is we'll all have times when we have tantrums, when we get angry, when we want what we want, when we want it, when we become a bit egotistical, when we become a bit competitive, when we become selfish. We all have those traits within us at certain times. And depending on who's around us, they'll see it. It might not be excessive like the fully blown narcissist, but we all have elements. And we have to kind of understand that when we're dealing with narcissistic people, that we don't kind of put everybody in the same bracket of being one of those the one with the narcissistic personality disorders. That's to the extreme. We have to kind of look and see where is our partner on the scale of 1 to 10 in narcissism, because you can still get partners that criticize. I was watching The Love of Ada, very, very old film, on London Live, and the man came in and he shouted at his wife, and it was their anniversary, and she got so upset. Anyway, he walked off and went down to the pub, and she was left there crying. Then he comes back, maybe a few hours later. It doesn't really tell you the time. And she said, have you got... Sorry, got something on my lip. Have you got my anniversary present? And he said, oh, yeah. And he goes to the door, and he says, where's my old jacket? And she said, oh, what do you want the old jacket for? I gave it to the rag and bone man. Ah, you silly meddling idiot, you fool, you this, you that. And she turns around and says, oh, you don't have to react like that. You don't have to shout like that. And his behaviour could be perceived as being narcissistic. In the fact that he was belittling her, he was calling her names, he was putting her down, she felt like crap, and she's turned around and said to her, I wish I hadn't married you. And he stormed out, and the next thing you know, she thinks he's in a car crash, and blah, blah, blah. And then, he comes, it's not him, and then he hugs her, and she says, I really love you. But I was looking at that, and I was wondering if, from today's diagnosis, then would he, I'm only giving you a small part of it, but would he have been considered a narcissist? We see lots of relationships where women tolerate these husbands who don't give them anything to hold on to, or sometimes they give them a little something and that's enough to last them I don't know how long. But for most of the time, they are put down, they're not appreciated, they're expected to do everything. The husband just does the main and doesn't kind of contribute or help in the house. And so they kind of feel, exhausted, but they tolerate it because they think that's the way it's meant to be. So I just think that there's levels of narcissism, and I don't think we should bung everybody in the same basket, because there are so many videos on narcissistic behavior. And like I said, one of them nearly convinced me, that people I know are narcissistic. But then when they're talking about they have no empathy at all, and I remember somebody I knew who used to get feel satisfaction out of getting a rise out of me losing my temper, me losing my cool, because I'm normally quite calm and cool. And yet this person would rile me to such an extent I'd be screaming. I couldn't understand why that person would be sitting there as cool as a cucumber and look at me as though I was mad, for getting in such a tizzy. But that was kind of scary. That was a scary situation because I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand narcissism then. I didn't realize he was a narcissist. So yeah, you do have them. But we have to remember that there are degrees, and not everybody who shows narcissistic traits needs to be written off and said, okay, they're a narcissist, I'm not going to bother with them. You know, it's all about them. They're just selfish. Because, like I said, you watch some of these movies, and if you, you know, so especially some of the old movies, a lot of those men are narcissists by today's definition. And the way they behave in relationships, there's a lot of narcissistic traits. So we just have to be careful that we don't bung everybody in the same under the same umbrella. I just wanted to make sure that I'd covered the most important things. Yeah, I've already said that. You know, when a child, a parent has been giving child a lot of attention, and then the child starts, you know, reaching up and wanting to hold them. Like on the train, I saw this little child, and he was trying to get in between the mother's legs and pull it, you know, putting his hand up like he wanted her, and she's criticizing him. Stop it, and all kinds of things, and stop being silly. And but the thing is that by doing that, you are confusing the child, and the child will become resentful because they still feel entitled to that affection you gave them in the beginning. And why shouldn't it continue? They don't understand why it can't continue. Let me see. Yeah, the child will probably think, how come 1 minute you're giving me all the attention, and then now when you've got me used to it, you don't want to give it to me anymore. That's how a child probably would think. You know, you've been giving me all this love and attention. I'm used to it. You know, I want it. And now you want to take it away. They don't understand. They don't know if affection is conditional. Young people end up growing up into people who will give them the attention when they want it. That is why we all possess narcissistic traits, depending on how boundaries were set and socialization skills and behaviors are taught. As a young person, we are left wondering if we have done something wrong, why our parents do not want to continue to love us. Put love in those those inverted commas. We do not realize that they might have other things to do, and probably made sacrifices to give us the affection and the time that they did at that time. Because some of us end up doubting ourselves, especially if we have been left with neighbours, relatives, friends, foster parents, etc., we try to adapt insecurely as best as we can. In early childhood, we lack the ability to self-validate, so we rely on others to confirm our worth, and we end up giving them the power and authority to evaluate us, and end up seeking approval from people who are not qualified. And most of all, they have issues themselves. We tend to seek approval from people who have their own issues. Depending on the feedback of people who have unresolved issues of their own, is a prescription for disaster. We end up imagining defects, shortcomings, weaknesses instead of our strengths. In the end, we tend to concentrate on where we are unable to meet the approval of others. Okay, we tend to concentrate on where we're unable to meet the approval of others instead of our own sense of what is right. Some children are more sensitive to criticism than others, and some parents make their children feel more accepted. You see, when you're criticizing children, one child might take it on the chin, the other one might be devastated. So that's another thing you're dealing with when you're dealing with young children and setting boundaries and changing your habits. You have to do it gradually. You can't just be picking up your son or daughter, kissing them, cuddling, holding them, every day for like 6 months, and then all of a sudden you're saying, look, keep quiet, I haven't got time to hold you, go over there, sit down, whatever you say to the child. It doesn't work. The child doesn't understand that change in temperament and behavior. Telling a child that she or he is wonderful can foster maladaptive narcissism, and having parents who harshly scrutinize or scapegoat the child. Both types of parenting hinder the child from developing strong, resilient ego. Extremes. I got this bit from Psychology Today. Extremes can lead the child, once an adult, possessing a fragile ego, easily provoked by external criticism and blame. There is a distinction between healthy narcissism and unhealthy narcissism, which operates from a place of ill will. The unhealthy one operates from a place of ill will. Envy, they just want to put people down, criticize, that kind of stuff. We all have the ability to be completely self-serving, manipulative, snappy. We can slam doors, we can have tantrums. We seek our own self-preservation at the expense of someone else sometimes. In making up for our self-doubt and insecurities, we are apt to not consider the thoughts and feelings and needs of others. Narcissists who harm and take advantage of others are those who are trying to get approval or develop the approval they missed out on as a child. Did the family impose high standards? Not excelling could make you feel like a failure. So there's a lot of things that happen in the world of a child that we're unaware of as parents. We just do things naturally. It's natural for us to hold a child and tell it how much we love it, especially when it's just born, and cuddle it and cuckoo it, and then you reach a stage where you've got things to do. You've got to get back into ordinary life. You've got to work. You've got to clean the house. You've got to cook. You've got to do all kinds of things that a child won't understand. But the child, and because you can't speak to the child, that child could grow up with narcissistic issues. So I wonder if this makes sense to you. I do hope it does. And that's all for now. Bye-bye.